Bach Brandenburg Concerto, make sure you've listened to the recording with the score before you watch this video, and then again after you've watched this video. Melody. Much of the music is in conjunct, stepwise style, for example in bar 2, though there are leaps, for example the fourths in bar 1. Often the conjunct music is extended to scalic runs, especially in the harpsichord part. There is a rising sequence at bar 137. Same short phrase repeated several times, going up one note each time. There are occasional ornaments with trills, for example bar 19 in the harpsichord part. There are appoggiaturas in the main middle section theme when it returns in A major, for example bar 148. Rhythm and meter. Meter is 2/4 duple time, 2 beats to the bar, but the music could also be notated in 6/8 compound time. It is essentially a Baroque jig, a dance in compound duple time. It uses triplets and dotted rhythm throughout. The dotted semiquaver grouping, as in the first bar, would have been performed in triplet rhythm, so the dotted quaver would be 2/3 of a beat, and the semiquaver would be 1/3 of a beat. The harpsichord part in particular has many semiquaver runs. Dynamics. It is important to note that the mechanical action of the harpsichord prevented variations in dynamics unless a double manual harpsichord happens to be available. The evidence suggests that a single manual harpsichord would have been used for this piece. Accordingly, there are no dynamic markings for the harpsichord in the original score. On the few occasions where there are dynamic markings for any instrument, they are there largely for balance reasons, to ensure a particular musical line can be heard. So, the solo violin part is marked piano at the beginning of the middle section so that it does not drown out the sound of the tune on the choir to solo flute. Context. I'm not going to read all the details here, but there's something about Bach, something about Prince Leopold, and something about the Brandenburg concertos that you can look up yourself on the mind map. Articulation. There's nothing specific to be said here. Texture. The texture is polyphonic, contrapuntal. That means it contains several independent melodic strands sounding together, so polyphonic or contrapuntal. The movement begins in fugal style. A fugue is a complicated piece which uses imitation almost throughout. This piece is not an actual fugue, but uses fugal characteristics. The opening 4 bars are a good example. The subject, the main theme, first statement, in the solo violin is followed by an answer in the flute at a distance of 2 bars, and we now have 2-part imitation and the beginning of this fugal texture. There are then 4 additional bars before the harpsichord left hand enters with the subject, that's the main tune, which is then answered 2 bars later by the right hand. The fugal texture continues. The harpsichord plays in 2-part counterpoint. Once both hands are playing, the music is in 4-part counterpoint. Occasionally the flute and violin play in thirds. The harpsichord also does this. When the ripieno, that means the full string section, is playing, the solo flute and violin sometimes double each other in unison, for example in bar 33. The bass line for the new middle section theme has a tonic pedal on B. Structure. The structure of this movement is very different from the standard ritornello form found in the concertos of composers such as Vivaldi. That is, the tune and then an episode and then a short version of the tune, and then another episode, and then another short version of the tune, etc. That's ritornello form. This movement here is a large ternary structure, ABA. ABA. Very like the first movement, this third movement could be thought of as ritornello form because the tune keeps returning, although the return to original A section material is never entirely conclusive within the middle section. I don't quite understand that sentence, never mind. This introduction of motifs from other sections was a common and clever technique often used by Bach. In section A, which is in D major, the beginning is in fugal style. There are brief sections in the dominant key, A major. B, the middle section begins at bar 79 in the relative minor key, B minor, with a new theme in the flute, which has many similarities to the main one. The second theme returns in bar 148, this time in the dominant A major in the ripieno. That's the full string section, as opposed to the concertino, which is the small group of soloists. Fragments of the theme from the A section make frequent appearances, and the section ends, that's the second section, the B section, with a perfect cadence in B minor. The final A section is a repeat of the opening A section, beginning with an extra D major chord in the continuo, that's the harpsichord, to establish the return to the tonic key. Harmony. The harmony uses the standard chords of the time, that is, predominantly chords 1, 4, and 5, with occasional use of 2 and 6, hardly ever 3, if at all, and hardly ever 7, if at all, and includes dominant sevenths in various inversions. That means the fifth chord with an extra seventh note on top, sometimes with the bottom note in the bass, sometimes with other notes of the chord in the bass. The harmony is functional. The harmony uses mainly root position and first inversion chords. Perfect cadences, that's 5, 1, announce the ends of sections. Suspensions are used occasionally. That is, the 9/8, for example, the 9/8 suspension at bar 130. A suspension is when one holds on a note that fitted with the chord, and then the chord changes, and then there's a clash, because the note is suspended over, but then the clash resolves, because the note then falls to another note, which is part of the new chord. Instrumentation. Each of the 6 Brandenburg concertos has different instrumentation, including wind instruments and unusual combinations. In contrast, most Baroque concertos featured either 1 or 2 solo violins, a string orchestra, and continuo. Examples of concertos with conventional string-only instrumentation with continuo can be found in the Edexcel suggested wider listening list. Yes, I've made a link to that on my main mind map. So that's Handel Concerto Grosso Opus 6, number 5, second movement, and Vivaldi Winter from the Four Seasons. Further details regarding instrumentation. The continuo, that's the harpsichord plus the bass instrument. I'll read this. The continuo consisted of 1 or more bass instruments, such as the cello and double bass, together with at least 1 chordal instrument, such as a harpsichord or cembalo. The keyboard player would realize the harmony in the right hand. That means play chords based on figured bass, which is a shorthand system of numbers under the bass notes, which guided the player as to what type of chords to play. So bass instruments plus a chordal instrument. Unusual features. In the Brandenburg concertos, Bach broke with tradition in a number of ways. In this fifth concerto, for instance, there is an extended virtuoso solo part for the harpsichord. That means difficult and showy. This is regarded as the first concerto for keyboard solo in musical history, and much of the most difficult solo music is found in the rapid scalic runs in both right and left hands. There are also passages where both hands play trills at the same time. The first movement even has an extended cadenza, which means unaccompanied solo section. Bach probably played the harpsichord part himself. Only occasionally does the harpsichord play continuo chords, for example in bars 29 to 37. In these passages there is figured bass. So what that means is that the harpsichord is a flashy, showy solo instrument most of the time, but sometimes simply joins the bass instruments to fill out the chords, which is what the section on continuo was all about. Right, here we have this word ripieno again. The string orchestra only has one violin part. Normally there would be two. And the concertino, the solo group, consists of the combination of flute, violin and harpsichord. The Baroque flute was very different from today's instrument. It was made of wood and had finger holes and just one metal key. Concerto grosso. Technically, the piece is a concerto grosso, which means a concerto for a large number of instrumental parts. Even so, it is likely that at the original performances there would have been only one player to a part. Range, there's nothing to say about range at this point, nor about word setting or painting, so we'll have a little bit here about tonality. The music is in D major. This key is used for most of the two A sections, that means the first and the last section. The B section, the middle section, modulates to the dominant A major and relative minor, which is B minor. The music is diatonic, which means it stays in a key. Make sure you listen to the music with the score. A link to this video is at the bottom of this particular video, as is a link to this mind map that you should go through yourself.